So going out to the cold market where nobody knows who you are, you have no track record, you're a complete unknown entity, and winning clients, that's easy, right? No, it's not like a big deal. From what I hear, if you just put up a LinkedIn post, people just start throwing deals at you. Is that not the case?
That sounds
Am I
great.
mistaken? Am I understanding, Gary?
That sounds spectacular.
All jokes aside, let's have a serious conversation. There is absolutely, and I don't know where it comes from, Carrie. Maybe we'll talk about this today. I don't know where it comes from, but there is a very serious misunderstanding or underestimation, if you will, of just how hard it is to convert a cold lead, a cold prospect, into a paying client. And not impossible by any means. And I wouldn't even say it's hard work or a lot of effort, but it's a challenging task. And for those of you who have made any attempts at this, you'll probably be nodding along because chances are, if you're like most people, the vast majority of your attempts have failed. And if you haven't tried it before, that's really who I'm talking to here. You've likely, all of your business has come from your network and word of mouth and referrals, and you have benefited from the trust in those relationships. You have a few relationships with people that know you, like you, and trust you, and your business has come from them or people that they've referred you to. And so you've never really had to engage a completely cold prospect who has no backstory on you, no context with you whatsoever, and go through the process of converting them into a client. And that's what we want to talk about here today is give you a bit of a reality check on how hard that is, what's required to do so, because it is possible. I mean, we built an entire business and we do it every single day, and we help clients inside of our programs do it every single day. So there is a path. It's probably different than you think it is. And part of our intention today is to illustrate that difference for you. And hopefully by the end of it, empower you to be able to approach that the right way, because the upside of doing it is obviously considerable.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of this really has come from this feeling that it's easy, right? Has come from new technology and social media. If you think about, I don't know, 30 years ago, right? The traveling sales, I'll say salesman because that was usually a guy, right? He was the rise and grind. He was on the phone all day, every day, making cold calls, going out, taking donuts, shaking hands with the receptionist, doing all of the things. And again, to close a relatively small number of deals, but fully working, a prospect list and building a prospect list day after day after day after day after day. And now we live in a world where, because we've heard these stories about like someone posted something and it went viral, or someone, created some kind of online asset and it worked for them, there's this feeling that as long as someone just sees that I exist, they're going to want to work with me. When what's much closer to the reality is the old school view, right? We've got a lot more tools and tactics and, easier ways to connect with people, absolutely, than we did before. You don't have to get in your car and go to their office. But what doesn't change is the process that you need to take somebody through from not knowing that you exist to wanting to write you a check and let you into a vulnerable area of their business. That hasn't changed. And we don't give enough, aren't serious enough often about what that looks like. It's still a process. And maybe even more so now because people are used to being burned and, being faced with the fly by night, not so useful solutions that they may find online.
Yeah. And I think that marketers have a high degree of responsibility for the situation we find ourselves in, because there's a lot of people out there who are selling a tactic, selling a solution, and whose marketing strategy is to make their tactic or their solution or their methodology look as easy as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And there's reasons for that. It's a smart strategy. It has some adverse consequences and probably a lot of dissatisfied clients. I mean, we're very different in that, well, by virtue of this episode, we're very forthright with our clients about this is hard work. And if you're expecting an easy button, go and pay somebody else for that, because we don't have one. We just have good old fashioned hard work and a battle tested strategy that performs if you put in the work, but we don't have an easy button. And there's a lot of marketers out there who are selling easy buttons. And, I would say there's a lot of naive consultants out there who, love the idea of, well, if I just press these buttons on LinkedIn or just, game the algorithm or pull these levers, I can kind of hide behind my keyboard and then I get this full calendar full of leads and appointments, and all I need to do is talk to them and book the business. It's a very alluring proposition that people have been prey to, but have learned the hard way that that's all it is. It's an alluring proposition and not really a reality. So I just think that there's just to give people a little bit of relief, and I don't blame you for your underestimation of what's required to win business in the cold market. I think you've been sold a dream that just doesn't exist.
Well, and it's human nature, right? There's something about going down this magic bullet path that not only looks easier, but I think the other thing that is often true of these easy button, as you call them, solutions, is they don't require you to put yourself out there so much, right? It is truly sit behind a keyboard, press a button, and then maybe it doesn't work, but when it doesn't work, it doesn't hurt as much, right? When it doesn't work, it doesn't feel like you personally are being rejected. When it doesn't work, it doesn't feel like you've made yourself, you've opened yourself up to the world and someone has completely, slammed the door in your face. And I hate to say it, but the reality is you're going to have some doors slammed in your face, and you're going to connect with people who maybe aren't the right fit, and you're going to have some difficult conversations. Those will become less and less as you refine your strategy and your approach. But there's really no way to protect yourself from the learning that comes from doing that difficult work. Now, you want to do it within some kind of a structure, some kind of a framework, some kind of a strategy that ensures that you're not kind of functioning that way forever, right? You want to get more efficient, you want to get more effective, you want to make sure that you're in front of the people that you want to be speaking to. But feeling like you can skip past that is dangerous, because it not only doesn't get you success, but it doesn't get you what you need to learn to be able to move forward.
Yeah. Now, look, I think the crux of the matter comes down to this. We hear this a lot. Folks say, well, look, if I could just get in front of the right people and get into a conversation with them, fairly confident I'll be able to, engage them, identify their needs and their challenges and their pain points, prescribe a solution, and then win a deal. And I have my skepticism of that, but that's for a separate conversation. That there's a prevailing belief among people that if I just get in front of the right people, just get the meetings, everything will be okay. And again, I'll attack that premise on another episode, but let's assume that that's true. What folks really underestimate is what's required to get the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
What an educated prospect buyer who has resources to spend and has a problem that you can solve, what they need to see in you to get a meeting is a very high bar, because busy buyers and busy prospects, assuming that they have, the resources to hire you, they don't talk to strangers for no reason. Busy executives, busy business owners, entrepreneurs, department heads, C-suite directors, VPs, whatever it may be. And there's varying degrees of difficulty in terms of accessing these folks. But as a general rule of thumb, they don't talk to strangers on the internet. It's not a thing that they do. That's an exception. If they end up talking to somebody who's cold, they never met before, that's an exception, not the rule. And I'd ask you, the listener, when's the last time you talked to a stranger on the internet? And it happens. I'm sure it happens. And I want you to really think about this. But I'll tell you what we hear from folks that reach out to us is they go, well, I've been following you for this amount of time, and I've consumed this information from you, and I went to this workshop, and I listened to this many podcast episodes. folks are getting to know us really thoroughly before engaging in any kind of meaningful sales interaction with us. Which begs the question, as your 10 LinkedIn posts in the last 6 months and your thinly veiled outreach messages that are just trying to book meetings and pitch something, is that sufficient evidence for a prospect to look at and go, this is somebody that's worthy of a conversation? Probably not. Right.
Yeah. And, to your point, it's so interesting to watch people live with the kind of mental disconnect, thinking that if they just put something out there, people are going to respond. And also knowing, to your excellent point, that that's not what they do. Right? We are all, very specific about how we spend our time. We are all very specific about who we let into our inner circle. And you're not just talking about having a conversation with someone, you're talking about having a conversation about someone, about the problem that's keeping them up at night, right? You're talking about someone wanting to speak to you because they need to admit that they can't do this thing that they're trying to do, that they haven't figured out how to make it work. And that's a high hurdle to jump, right? It's not just, hey, let's have coffee. It's a true in-depth conversation about what's going on in their business, in their life, in their brain, in their stomach. And so recognizing that means that you'll be in a position to respect that and treat those folks, those potential clients, those prospects, in a way that recognizes it. And that, quite frankly, even changes the tone, right? It changes the tone of what you're saying to them. It changes, the amount of time that you spend in their, in a given social media feed. It changes how you reach out to them and what you say, because you're not just saying, hey, I'm here, jump on board. What you're saying is, I care about you and your problem. I understand it. I know about it. Like I know a lot, and there's potentially a reason for us to have a conversation. And that's a very different stance than just kind of throwing all sorts of random stuff out.
Yeah, I'm
into the
a
world.
bona fide expert, right? So publishing is important, but what you publish is far more important. Here's a common story, and I'll tell you a specific story, but it's, there's many examples of this. We had a client named Chad who told us this story. I think we have this somewhere documented in a video. Chad put up a post on LinkedIn, and somebody who's in his target market, who had come in through his outreach methodology that we helped them install via 90-day pipeline, she was a president of a company that's right in his target market, and she shared the post on LinkedIn and then offered some commentary. Chad saw this and sent her a message and said, oh, thanks for sharing, and offered some additional commentary on the topic. And they're having now an intelligent conversation about a problem, right? She replies to him and she says, I just spent the last 30 minutes on your LinkedIn profile. When can we talk? Now, I want to examine that statement a little more closely. I just spent the last 30 minutes on your LinkedIn profile. She didn't look at his headshot and read his bio for 30 minutes. What she did was she scrolled down to his activity, and she binged on his material, on his content that he had been at that point publishing for, I think, probably weeks, if not months, right? There's a lot of material there for her to dig into and come to a conclusion, which evidently she did, that here's the guy who solves a problem that we have and is talking about that problem intelligently and on terms that we can agree with. We probably ought to have a conversation. And we've had a separate episode, I think, about front-loading belief. That's what he did. He front-loaded belief before they ever talked. And then 2 weeks later, Chad had a 6-figure deal signed with an ice-cold lead that he had never met weeks previously. But again, it wasn't that he timed the perfect outreach message. It wasn't that, that one LinkedIn post converted her. It was a combination of, he had enough material on there to convince her that it was worth the conversation. She didn't buy right away, but it got him the conversation. he was positioned well on his LinkedIn profile, so she could see clearly that he's a bona fide expert and was able to point him to a specific problem that she was facing. And then obviously Chad did his part in closing the deal. But that's, and that's one of the faster cases, right? I mean, how often do we hear of an ice cold lead on LinkedIn buying in a couple of weeks? I'm not going to argue that that's the norm. I'd say that's pretty quick, but it is a good example of what's possible when you stack things up correctly.
And the other thing I want to just add to that, because I think it's a second layer to this, is it wasn't just necessarily that he had a bunch of content that was there. I mean, that, of course, he's brilliant. He speaks to things really well. I mean, his content is great. But the other important piece to recognize, and I'll say this for the folks that are listening, is content's not a one-way street, right? You're not just pushing it out and hoping it lands on somebody and they can't brush it off, so then they call you. He was interacting, right? She didn't just see what he posted. She also saw the really intelligent and in-depth discussion that he was having with the folks who were responding to his posts, including her. And so it wasn't just a case of somebody, spewing knowledge. It was someone who's interested. It was someone who cares. It was someone who has something to say. And that's who you want to be seen as.
Now, I think to bring this home, here's a perspective shift that I think might be helpful to folks. Okay, let's just simplify the market. You've got cold leads, you've got warm leads, and you've got hot leads. Okay, let's just simplify that and assume there's 3 different types of leads: cold, warm, and hot. Cold are the ones that don't know you. That's the biggest part of the market. Right. And you can think about this as maybe like concentric circles. Cold is that outer layer of the market. They don't know who you are. They don't care who you are. They don't know you from a can of paint. You're completely invisible to them. Okay. And then you have on the inside of that circle, you have a warm layer of the market. There's some familiarity. Currently, perhaps they've worked with you in the past, or they've heard of you, or you've been referenced before, or they found you on LinkedIn. There's some familiarity. They're not cold. They know who you are. They're not hot in that they're not interested buyers yet, but they're aware, familiar. And then in the middle of the circle, you have hot, right? Like they're ideal clients. They're a good fit to work with you. They know that you can help them. They're hot and they want to buy something. Okay. Obviously, what we want to do is increase the number of hot buyers in the middle. Okay. But here's the mistake that people make. They think that they can take people from ice cold to red hot. They can skip from like the outer part of that circle to right into the middle with like a message, or a post. And people just skip over and jump. And that's just not practically how it works. What you need to do and what you need your marketing strategy to deliver on is bring those ice cold prospects into the warm layer and develop some familiarity. Get them to start consuming your material, interacting and engaging with your material, get a conversation going. Don't just ask for meetings willy-nilly on LinkedIn. That makes you look like a desperate, sleazy spammer. Actually be a human being and be relational and conversational and get to know people and build relationships at scale in that warm layer so that the folks who have a problem that you can solve when they know that they need your help can self-identify themselves as being your prospective clients and jump into that hot layer. But there's that piece in the middle, I think, that people overlook, which is building relationships with the cold market, turning those into warm relationships in order to turn them into hot leads.